Hey, what's going on, everyone? My name is Matt Jarbo. This is the Mundane Matt channel. And today, a very interesting thing happened. Someone who was an absolute righteous cock on social media was fired. Now, I'm not for people being fired for their opinions on social media. I'm not for people being fired for having a difference of opinion or even engaging in political discourse on social media. But when you are a person who starts attacking the fan base or the customers of the company that you represent, I can't defend you anymore. In fact, that's basically what happened here. This is Chuck Wendig, the story of him at least. Now, last week over on 3 Buck Theater, I did cover him and I called him a liability. And I said to Lucasfilm and Marvel, this is a guy who is going to end up damaging your brand if you're not careful because of how he was acting online, skirting dangerously close to calling for outright violence on Trump supporters. And that's a terrible thing to do. Why would you ever, in your wildest dreams, ever want to call for violence against Trump supporters? It's the stupidest thing. But of course, this is where things tend to go when you deal with people on the left who just cannot deal with the fact that Trump is in office for at least a couple more years. I'm sorry, that's just the way things are. But Chuck Wendig expressed himself a little bit too hard, and as a result has been fired. And he says here that they fired him for vulgarity and too much politics. Now, keep in mind that James Gunn was also very vocal about his politics. That's not what got him fired. So let's just make that abundantly clear here in regards to that. Now, at New York Comic Con last weekend, Marvel Comics officially announced Shadow of Vader, a 5-part miniseries written by Star Wars Aftermath book trilogy scribe Chuck Wendig. The last 2 issues will no longer be penned by Wendig, as the author has just revealed that Marvel has fired him. Now, if you've read Star Wars Aftermath or the other ones written by him, they're not very good. They're not very good. They're not very good at all. But to be fair, and I find this to be really funny, by the way, a little bit of history on Chuck Wendig is he got his start at Star Wars, writing Star Wars, based on a tweet. He tweeted them and says, "I want to one day write a Star Wars novel," and it ended up happening. And as a result, he got fired for things he tweeted. So we've kind of come full circle, Hakuna Matata and all that jazz. Now, in a lengthy statement posted to Twitter this afternoon, Wendig confirmed he had been fired by Marvel from both the final 2 issues of Shadow of Vader, as well as an as yet unannounced Star Wars book. IO9 reached out to Marvel Comics for a statement on Wendig's departure, but a spokesperson would only confirm that the publisher and Wendig had parted ways. We've also asked Lucasfilm for a comment, and they haven't said anything yet. Now, according to the writer, the decision came after the editor from Star Wars Comics at Marvel, Mark Paniccia, who cited Wendig's vocal presence on social media discussing Star Wars, the reaction to recent films and saga like The Last Jedi and U.S. politics as a primary reason for the decision. In Wendig's own words, it was too much politics, too much vulgarity, too much negativity. I'm going to argue that probably the last 2, specifically the middle one, is probably what got him fired. Now, another thing to consider when it comes to Chuck Wendig is that back in the fall of 2016, when Trump was in fact elected, Wendig went out there and called Trump supporters a bunch of names, and that led a lot of people on the right, specifically the provocateur and outright liar in many cases, Jack Posobiec, to start the Dump Star Wars hashtag, trying to claim that because people like Chuck Wendig did not care for Trump supporters, that Lucasfilm was going to go and alter Rogue One to be anti-Trump. Crazy on both sides is what I'm trying to get through here. Now, this is the whole tweet thread. We're going to go through the whole thing because it's a long one, but this goes through where his mind's at. He says here, so here's the thing that happened. I just got fired from Marvel, taken off of issues 4 and 5 of Shadow of Vader, and taken off as of yet unannounced Star Wars book. This might be a long thread, so apologies in advance. I hate to talk about this because honestly, it gives the worst people a win, something they've wanted for a while. But I also feel like I've long held to honesty and forthrightness, and I don't feel like lying when people realize I'm not on these books anymore. And I understand, look, you want to address the situation to your audience, but it's not that the worst possible people get a win. The worst possible people aren't the ones who fired you. Your actions are what led to people walking away. And believe me, we have to own our actions and things that we've done because our audience trusts us. And if we break that trust, and I have broken that trust, and I'm acknowledging that, you have to sit there and take ownership. This is not a situation where this is somebody else's fault. This was almost years, 2 years, it feels like, of sustained attacks on Trump supporters and other Star Wars fans who simply are vocal about the franchise. This is where it's at. This isn't a flash in the pan situation. This is years and years of this stuff. So it's just, well, it's what happens. It's unfortunate, but it's what happens. To rewind a little bit, when Star Wars Aftermath came out, I assume most know, but you don't. Maybe you don't. I put some elements in there, LGBT characters that were not well received by a certain subset of fandom. There was one LGBT character, and it was very briefly mentioned. Most people didn't care, but there were a couple that were kind of douchey about it. That resulted in both negative review campaign found across various Facebook groups and other worse places on the internet that began mounting the very minute the book dropped online. I was literally at a midnight release of the book. When I got done, there were already a pile of 1-star reviews piling up, which seemed strange, obviously, and scary too. I didn't understand what was happening at the time, and as a caveat, I obviously recognize that yes, some people just don't like the book for the usual reasons, and people who hold those reasons are not to be lumped in with the more skeptic side of the fandom. T-Long-DR, also see TLJ reviews. Look, here's the thing when it comes to Aftermath. The writing was atrocious. There's a reason why a lot of people don't like it. The writing was very bad. Now, it goes on to say here, I also started receiving tons of harassment that has gone on for years, harassment that has required me to contact local police and warn them of swatting attempts, harassment across all corners of the internet here, Facebook, Reddit, YouTube. Some of it was bot stuff, obviously, or sock puppets, but some of it was pretty creepy and very personal. I didn't call a lot of it out or even highlight, but it was there, sort of constant background noise. Christ, for an extra special treat, go search my name and check out the YouTube videos if you want an eye-opening glimpse. In which case, you'll find 2 from me. Like I said, one of them last week was saying he's a liability, and I did, just Chuck, if you watch this, I did say, you got to pull back on this. If not, you're going to probably get in trouble. But to talk about the harassment part of this, I do want to say I understand entirely where he's coming from. Doing this stuff as an online career, being an online personality, whether you're an author or a stupid YouTube commentator, harassment happens. It's not fun. We don't highlight it, but it happens more often than you think. And I'm wondering here if just this is a buildup of just anger and resentment without a proper outlet. So he turned his attention on those who were vocal against Star Wars and or those who were Trump supporters. And that is not the right course of action. Again, believe me when I say that is not the right course of action. Now, it goes on to say here, and I was worried a bit because I thought I screwed up. I wondered for a time that the book was bad. Yeah. But then it hit list and stayed on list for 4 weeks. And the next 2 books hit list too. And Empire's End landed even higher on the list than the first book. And privately, I was told by folks inside Lucasfilm that there was no worry here, that they valued that I had speaking out for myself and for Star Wars, which had always honestly been a progressive branding company. And it made me very proud to work for them, not just because, holy hell, basking in the glow of Star Wars, but because the people were great and they totally got it. Hell, a lot of people inside LFL have experienced considerable harassment. I mean, that's not news, but Kelly Marie Tran, yeah, okay. And even that's up for debate in some circles. Now, he goes on to say, after I did Hyperion with Marvel, they hired me to write the TFA adaptation, which meant I got to work with some wonderful folks on a project that was tricky because it ended up being more of a translation of a movie than an adaptation. Then he goes on to talk about Comicsgate, whatever, for a second. And he goes on to say, still, I thought things were good. I'd hoped to do more work with Marvel or Star Wars or a combo of 2 someday. Comics isn't really my thing per se, but I felt like I was getting a handle on it. Of course, the harassment continued. It's got even worse again when The Last Jedi came out, which I'm sure is no surprise to anyone who's ever tweeted, hey, I really liked The Last Jedi. People have gotten crap for saying that. That's true. I got called a paid shill for Disney for Lucasfilm when I saw the movie a second time, and I was all like, I still didn't like it, but I'm more apathetic to it. So yeah, it's kind of an odd place to be, but at the same time, a lot of it is just constant background noise. And you do have to make that the priority when dealing with it, which again, sustained harassment can grind on you. And I think that's essentially what he's getting to here. But again, he's still very much putting the blame on other people and not dealing with his own shortcomings in regards to mental health. And again, I'm not trying to put blame on him in that regard. Like, everyone handles it differently, but that's kind of the way I see it. He goes on to say, then we announced Shadow of Vader just last weekend. And people were excited and I thought everything was good. I was not made aware of any issues, and my online self has always been my online self. So except, yeah. No, today I got the call. I'm fired because of the negativity and the vulgarity that my tweets bring. Seriously, that's what Mark, the editor, said. It was too much politics, too much vulgarity, too much negativity on my part. And that's absolutely true, Chuck. I outlined this last week. You were literally a stone's throw away from calling for outright violence against Trump supporters. That is not the right course of action. That is not how you do this. And it was becoming a liability at Marvel and at Lucasfilm for this to be a thing. That is unfortunate. Years of this, someone should have told you stop ahead of time. To be honest, someone should have given you a heads up. That much I will attest to. He goes on to say, basically because I wasn't civil, but you did call for uncivility against those who you disagreed with ideologically and politically. You did. So yeah, you weren't civil. He goes on to say, which of course is their decision to make. I'm not their boss, and turns out they're not the boss of me either. Har har. I joke because otherwise I cry, and I understand that feeling. I'm not going to mock him for that one. My understanding is over this call was that this was a Marvel decision, not a Lucasfilm decision, but I can't really confirm that. The editor said that he made the call. It seemed genuinely upset at my tweets and profanity, so maybe that's accurate. And again, that's his right to do. If they honestly feel that my presence will damage the book, I don't want that. I want the book to shine. I want artists like Juanin Ramirez and Greg Smallwood to do their amazing thing. Artists like that are God in my mind, so I'm happy not to distract from the literal magic. But it does set a troubling precedent. See, again, he's like, okay, I screwed up. Maybe it's my fault. I want these guys to do really well. Now we get back into, well, here's why it happened. That it's not my fault. But it does set a troubling precedent. We've already seen James Gunn, Jessica White, and so on, folks fired because they riled up the wasp's nest of the asterisk gate. He's meaning Gamergate. And it seems odd to be mad that I'm mad about politics when look around. Climate change, kids in cages, sexual harassers at the topmost tiers of power, and so on. A call for civility as the PA GOP candidates threatened Tom Wolf with a glass golf cleat stomping. I don't know, man. Again, look. The thing is you can be upset at what someone else says, but when you bring yourself to their level and almost call for the same kind of violence, you're no better. I understand the argument of wanting to fight fire with fire, but that's, again, you can, but then you put a lot of other things at risk. It is part of the problems where we find ourselves online right now. This was not a one comment thing. This was years of sustained commentary online that just got to be too much. Now he goes on to say, I know it hands ComicGate a big win. It will embolden them, but they won. I'm out of Marvel, and I guess for now, at least out of any kind of Star Wars. Do your victory lap, I guess. Just please leave me out of it. And all that being said, a lot of wonderful people still work inside those institutions and story worlds, and I hope you'll continue to support them and the stories they're telling. To conclude, this is really quite chilling, and it breaks my heart. I am very sad. I am worried for the country I live in and the world, and for creative people all around. Courage to you all. I have a dire fear this is going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better. Now, Chuck, I'm going to tell you, man, I resonate quite a bit with your last little statement there. And if that kind of rhetoric is what you would use on social media to describe your social beliefs, your political beliefs, your ideology, your narrative, and that would have been the angle you wanted to play, you would not find yourself in this situation, because that is a righteous course of conversation to have. That is saying, listen, I fear for my country. I fear for where things are going. I fear for the artist world. I fear for all of these things. And that is fine to feel. In fact, you should feel those things if you want to. I'm not trying to tell you not to at all. And you can express them like that too. But it's when you take that anger and that vitriol and that rage and you turn it on the fans of companies of which you represent and are hired for, that's a problem. And James Gunn did something similar, and they ended up getting him. I don't agree with it. This one is a little bit different, because this was not things you had done 6 years ago. This was 3 years ago, or 2 years ago at least, and onward. It was continued, and you started turning it on the fans. That was never good. That was never good. And then he ends up here saying, P.S. vote in November, which I agree. Vote, 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 vote. But this is where the author of the article comes in, and this is where we start getting into the whole Gamergate territory here, because he mentions Comicsgate, which is not Gamergate, by the way. Now, Wendig's exit from Shadow of Vader marks merely the latest successful weaponization of a supposed appeal to civility by online trolls. Notable past toxiculture campaign Gamergate and its copycat Comicsgate cited the need for civil discourse, while at the same time leveraging targeted campaigns of harassment, including doxing, death threats, and more. Now, here's the thing with that. There are third-party trolls in Gamergate. We've talked about this. The FBI did a 2-year investigation into Gamergate, determined that most of the people who were in Gamergate were left of center, right? We're talking like left-leaning libertarian types, all right, that did not believe in doxing, threatening, or harassing. There were third-party trolls from Something Awful, third-party trolls from 4chan and 8chan, and just general third-party trolls that were coming in quite a bit to handle this and to act that way. That's not Gamergate. But of course, people like the author of this article here and people like Chuck Wendig in no way, shape, or form would ever possibly remotely consider that. Why? Because it's the boogeyman. It's the boogeymen, so to speak. Anytime something comes up, they can just invoke it and it goes, oh, that's the problem with it. Now, it finishes up here by saying, these forces seek to force companies like Marvel or their parent company, Disney, as was the case in the firing of James Gunn from Guardians of the Galaxy 3, to cut ties with vocal, progressive talent in the hopes of avoiding online backlash. These campaigns only serve to harass and silence voices they disagree with and punish those voices for daring to talk back. But here's the thing with that, though. It goes both ways. It goes both ways. What happened when Adam Baldwin 4 years ago came out and coined the term Gamergate? He was smeared up and down the internet. If anyone inside of your circle, your bubble, comes out and speaks against the echo chamber, they are ostracized 100%. People like Chuck Wendig get championed. James Whitbrook is the author of this piece. They get championed because he's so vocal and he's so vulgar and he says things that you're too afraid to say, but this is a consequence of that. When in fact, we should be able to come to the table and have the discussions. We have to move past this online pedantic shit flinging. It's not going to work anymore. It's just not. Do I feel bad for Chuck Wendig over this? No, I don't. I wish I did. Part of me wants to. I've dug real deep trying to find that emotion, that feeling, in order to say, man, I'm sorry that this happened to you. One of the reasons why I don't feel bad is because Chuck brought this on himself. This was a moment. Several moments over the span of years, multiple years, where this sort of thing happened. That is why there's a problem. But I wish him the best of luck. I hope this is a learning experience, a reflective experience. And I hope it doesn't stop him from speaking his mind politically. But I hope it gets him to a point of realizing that civility and proper discourse matter. Because once you allow yourself to give in to those negative emotions, then you only serve to hurt yourself. I mean, what did Yoda say about it? Right? Was it hate leads to fear, or no, like fear leads to anger and anger leads to hate, right? Not the way of the Jedi, Chuck. Not the way of the Jedi.